Okay, good morning. We begin the fifth parak on 62a. Hasocher Poel lasos imo b'yayin nesach. So a non-Jew, an idolater, hires you, a Jew, to work with yayin nesach, wine that has been used for libations to idolatry. Scharo aser, you can't use the money that he pays you. Scharo lasos imo, and the Gemara will discuss the details of why and so on. Scharo lasos imo malacha acheres. What if he hired you for a more general purpose? He hired you to move furniture, and in the course of that, alpha bishamar haver lichavish shel yain nesach mimakom l'makom. In the course of your general work, he asks you to one of the tasks is to move this barrel of yain nesach from place to place. It's schar mutar. Then you can use the money that he pays you because he wasn't hiring you specifically for that. If you hire a donkey to transport yayin nesach schar, you can. So somebody rents from a donkey from you and pays you money to use the donkey for yayin to transport yayin nesach. You can't use that money. Schar leishev allowed, but if he hires the donkey for a more general purpose, to ride on it or whatever, even if he then uses it partly for yayin nesach, then it's okay to use the money from the rent. My Thomas Charas, Gemara wants to know what is the reason that you can't use the money that someone pays you to move yayin nesach. So if you want to say, look, the yayin nesach is something you're not allowed to get hana from, you're not allowed to get any benefit from, so the same would be transferred, the same property would be transferred to the money that you're being paid. But we have a counter example, Hare Arla, Uklaya Kerem. Here's two things that we often use that are to compare to things of Avodah Zarah. These Orla, which is the fruit of the first 3 years before you're allowed to use the fruit of a tree, and Kilayim. Those things are asur banad. Asur banad. We have a mishnah. Macharan v'kidesh b'dmeim mekudeshes. If you sell these things and then you use the money, for example, to marry someone, so you're getting benefit from the woman. You're basically, it's a financial transaction essentially from that perspective. It works, so you can benefit from that money of Orla. So it's not just because the yain nesach is asur b'hana and therefore it keeps it keeps its property of isur, even the money that is paid for it, because that's not the case with other isur hana. So maybe you want to say that, look, avodah zarah itself, right, the idol itself, let's say, if you sell that idol, the money that you get for the idol is still usher, right? It keeps in that case the Easter transfers. So maybe you want to say the same thing about labor for Avodah Zarah. But that can't be either. Vari Shvis, now we have a counterexample of Shemitah, right? Money, produce that's grown during Shemitah, and you sell it. You can't use the money either, right? So, um, uh, sorry, then you can. Then Utsnan, we have a Mishnah. So in other words, if you think that it's like Shemitah, so let's make it like Shemitah. Ha'omer l'pal. If you say to a worker, Helach dinar zeh lakot libo yarak hayom. Here's wages to harvest in my garden today. Schar aser, he can't use the money. Lakot li yarak hayom. But if he says, if he doesn't say for this money, if you give him $100 and or whatever, you don't give him anything yet, and you say pick vegetables for me today, schar mutar, and then if you later on pay him, then it's permitted. So um, so we see that money that you get as a wage for working with this produce can be permitted, right? As long as you don't make it explicitly linked to the action. Um, the difference is that if you say, pick, it's more like a sale of the vegetable. If you're saying for this vegetable, here's $100 for cucumbers, then it's more like a sale. If you just say pick cucumbers for me, then that's not a sale. That's more like a wage. In any case, we see that a wage for something that's Azerbaijan, like shvis, is permitted. So why would you say again that the wage for working with yain nesach is prohibited in our Mishnah? So. Omer Rabbi Abo, Omer Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Abo says, "Knasu knasu chachamim b'chamarim v'yayin nesek." It should be permitted. These two instances of renting donkeys or working directly with yayin nesach, it was something that the rabbis instituted. Really, from the Torah, it wouldn't be a problem. The money is okay, but the rabbis made a Zarah that it would not be permitted in these cases. So yayin nesach hadamar. So yayin nesach, we have what we just talked about, and chamaran mai. What is the deal with what's the donkey drivers he's referring to? The Tanya of the Brisa. Hachamarin shelosim malacha b'perashvis. If there are donkey drivers who are working with shmita stuff, schar and shvis, then their wages are considered shvis also. Now that you can't have enough from them, or really, it's not that you can't have enough, but there's an issue of beer shvis. My schar and shvis. So what does it mean? Their wages are shvis. If it's if you mean that that you have to pay them with shmita money or with shmita produce, then nimtza zeparechovim peroshvis. That can work because then you're benefiting. You're using shmita produce as for your own benefit. And the Torah says, no, you can eat the Shemitah produce, but you can't trade in it. Not for trading. So it must mean that the money that you exchange there takes on the properties of shvis. Umi kadosh, is that true? Batanya, but we have a counter brisa. Omer lepoel. Here's some money and pick vegetables for me today. Schar mutar. That's okay. Lakot li yarak bo hayom. But if he says, Lakoli bo yarak bo hayom, but pick vegetables for this money today. Schar aser. So that shows that the Shemitah, as we saw before, the Shemitah privilege does not carry over to the money earned. So what is it that we're talking about that the donkey driver's wages is schar and shvis? Their wages are shvis or shmita. Really, you can give a wage you can pay wages from shmita produce. But then we say that the Torah says you can eat shvis, but you can't do business with it. The Bryce is talking about where he's doing it in a permissible way. In other words, it's not a direct payment, but he's giving him a gift. You might even call it a thank you gift, like go help me out in my garden today, and at the end of the day I give you a gift of peroshvis. So it's not directly wages, it's kind of a workaround. Kinetznan, we have this idea in the Mishnah, halali peros, halali Yerushalayim l'chalik. When it comes to Maser Sheni, which you have to take to Yerushalayim to consume, you can't say to somebody, bring these Maser Sheni fruits to Yerushalayim, and we'll divide them there, right? I'll split them with you when we get there. So that is you're using the Maser Sheni to do business with, right? You're going to pay him from the Maser Sheni stuff. But you can say Halim la'ochlam v'lishtosam b'Yerushalayim, bring them up for eating and drinking in Yerushalayim. So he's not in that case. Then he hasn't directly promised to pay him from this maser fruit. It's implied, but it can be seen more as a gift. So in other words, you can engage in these kinds of legal fictions, if you like. Rava Amar, but Rava says the olam the kadosh b'kedusha shvis. Really, the brisa means that the wage becomes it takes on the properties of shvis when you pay with it. So why can't you Why can you pay your worker with perush shvis? Doesn't it have kedusha shvis? Um, Poel do nafish agre. It's not a lot of money. Lo kansu rabbanan. The rabbis didn't weren't so concerned about it. All right, we're talking about small amounts of money. The rabbis were more concerned about was, wholesale workarounds for the idea of shvis. Chamarin. But donkey drivers that they charge a lot of money, so then the rabbi said that kind of way. So really, wages from shvis is fine. But they made a rule for donkey drivers. That's a lot of money you're paying the donkey drivers. If you ever had to move across the country, you'll know it costs a lot of money. So um, so the rabbi said, we're not going to let you use shvis fruit to pay for it. So now we understand why Rabbi Yochanan said that these two things, donkey wages for donkey drivers and for yayin nesach, are prohibited to you. Umasnisin, but our Mishnah. Um, but our Mishnah says that you hire a day laborer to work with the ayin nesach. Isn't that like chicken feed? Isn't that a small amount of money? More like the more like the worker. And why did the rabbis, in the case of the Mishnah, say no? You can't use the money that you get for it. Chumra the ayin nesach shane. Oh, now we're talking about yayin nesach. So yayin nesach is something more serious. It has to do with idol worship, which is considered a very serious infraction, and therefore we're going to be more particular about not letting people use the money that they earn for it. Okay. They asked a question. So we've been talking about yayin nesach, right? Where you know that the wine has been dedicated to Avodah Zarah, right? What about stam yenam, right? So stam yenam is you don't know that. Like it belongs or was produced by or moved by an idol worshiper, but it might have been just regular wine drinking that he had in mind and not avodah zarah. So that's called stam yenam. So it's a little less. We're a little less stringent with it, perhaps. So what's the rule there? Since the problem that we're dealing with is avodah zarah, right? I mean, you don't know if it's avodah zarah, but the only problem with this wine is you're concerned about it having possibly been used for avodah zarah. So that's a serious matter we're dealing with. So maybe we'll give it the same rules as actual yayin nesach, odilma, or maybe Hoel v'tumaso kill, since we're less concerned about it, or the stigma, let's say, of stam yenam is less than that of yain nesach. Afschar nami kill, so we'll also be less stringent about the money that someone's making with it. So Tashma, let's see. Dahu gavra da agar arbe stam yenam. There was a guy who rented his boat for transporting stam yenam. Yavule Chite Bagra, and they paid him in wheat. Also, he went to Rav Chisda, can I use the wheat? Amalei, Zil Kolinhu V'Kavrinu Bekivre, go burn the wheat and bury the ashes. In other words, no, you can't use the wheat. So that would seem to indicate that, and this was a case of Stam Yenam. So that would indicate that you cannot use the wages of Stam Yenam. Valemele Badarinhu. Um, like, what was this business about burning it and burying it? Like, why is he insisting on such a complete method of destruction? You say just scatter it in the wind, like throw it away. Um, so Asu Buhu de Takala, because Rav Chizda was afraid that if you just put it out in the, put it in the trash, and somebody would come by and say, "Oh, there's some good wheat. I'm going to take it," and they wouldn't know that it's connected to avodah zarah. That's why he said, like, burn it and bury the ashes. Really clean huvla. Why do you have to bury it? Burn the wheat and then scatter the ashes. What do you need to bury it? Dilma mezablebu. Maybe people will you'll put out the ashes in your trash, and people will say, "Oh, ashes, that's great fertilizer," and they'll use that. So he wanted it to be buried. V'liparinu beinayu. So then, what do you have to burn it for? If you're going to bury it, what do you need to burn it? Milotnan whether it's stones that were used for stoning or a tree that was used for hanging, or this was by basting, of course, or the sword that was used for killing and basting for execution, or the cloth, the rope, whatever that was used to choke someone as part of misas basting. Kulam nikbarim. These things should be buried with the person who was executed. So um, the point is that these things are not to be used again. That's why they're being buried. So we see that it's okay to just bury it whole. You don't have to destroy it first and then bury it. Why, in the case of this wheat that was received as wages for stam yenam transportation, why does it have to be burned first before it's buried? Burying should be enough. So the answer is hasam de kakavre bevedina, there where it's being buried by the Beis Din, by the court, mocha milsa de haruge Beis Din. Everybody knows what's in there, right? Like it's going to say on his tombstone, this person was executed for the crime of whatever. So anybody who unearths the method of execution will know that it's forbidden. So we don't have to worry about, we don't have to burn it. But here, when you bury wheat, somebody's going to unearth it later and use it. They don't know that it was connected to Stam Yena. That's why you have to burn for Amar. Amar, people will say, Inashgana Vaise Kavrahacha. Why is the wheat buried? Because somebody's hiding it, right? He stole it and he's buried it here until he can retrieve it later. So there's no prohibition of hana. So that's why Rav Chisda said you should burn it and bury it. In other words, so that no one will have a chance to encounter it as and use it inadvertently as stamina. Tvei Rabbi Yanai Yazve Pere Shvis Me'anim. The people that lived with Rav Yanai's family, they borrowed Shemitah from the poor, Uparlahu b'Shmitas, and they paid them back with regular produce in exchange after Shvis. Also, Amalei Rav Yochanan, people told Rav Yochanan about this. It seems like a problem. Amalahu Yos Hein. They're doing okay. Because when they repaid, the original Shemitah was already consumed, presumably. So it's not a direct exchange. It's okay. It's not like buying shvis. It's repaying a debt. Ukenegdon be'esnan mutar. And similarly, when you hire a zona, when you hire a prostitute, if you pay after your business with her, then mutar, then you can use that money. I mean, ordinarily you can't use that money for the mizbeach, right? Lo savi asnan zona mechir kelef beis Hashem elokecha. But if it's indirect, if you pay her afterwards, then that money can be used for the mizbeach. The Tanya, it's a little surprising, but we'll parse this out a little more. The Tanya, we have a brisa, nasan lo v'lo bala. In the case of hiring a prostitute, you paid her, but then you didn't do the act with her. You didn't have sex with her, or bala v'lo nasan la, or you did have sex with her, but you didn't pay her. That's not a mutar. Then the price is permitted. So, well, this right away there's a little doesn't really we can't really understand this. So let's look a little further. If he gave her the money but he didn't have sex with her, then pshita. So it's not the wages of prostitution. Obviously, you can use the money. Since he didn't get any services, then he gives her money. The money is just a gift. Um, and the second case, ball level and nasala, if he did use her services and then he didn't pay her, what money are we talking about, right? We're saying that the money for prostitute, you're saying you didn't pay her, so there's no money here to be talked about. My esnana mutar. So what are you saying? The money is okay. There's no money here in this case, so we don't understand what you're talking about. This is what it means. By saying if you paid her and then you had sex with her. Or if you slept with her, you had sex with her, and then you paid her, that's not a mutar. Then it's okay. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. That's a classic case. Like Allah, Yisur Esnan. Like, what are you talking about? You pay her out if you have sex with her and you pay her. That's the classic Esnan, the case of Esnan Zona. What are you saying it's mutar? Amar Belazar, Hishakanma Vihikravtu. In other words, you paid her. She went ahead and brought a sacrifice on the mizbeach, and then gave you her services. Okay, so um, since the money was already used before the act of prostitution, therefore it's okay on the mizbeach. So I said, well, wait a minute. Hey, Chidami, what are you talking about? If he says like the animal, you can have the animal now, and later you'll provide services. Pshita shari. Then obviously it's fine because there hasn't been any prostitution yet. The animal's already but at the time that the services were exchanged or were provided, the animal was already gone, was already on the mizbeach. Um, in other words, its status is that of just a gift because he hasn't gotten the prostitution services yet. And if he doesn't say that, it's yours now, if he's saying here's the animal after you provide your services, then the animal is yours. So how could she have brought it as an offering? So how could she have given it on the mizbeach? They wouldn't have accepted it because she doesn't have title to it yet. So how do you understand the case? Ella diamarla, this is what happened. He said to her, Leve gabechad shasviya. You keep this until we sleep together. And then it becomes yours. But if you need it right now, then you can have it now. Okay, so in this case, it's explicitly linked to prostitution services. So even though she hasn't provided the services yet, the terms of the agreement are that it's linked to prostitution services, and that's why it can't go on the mizbeach. Um, okay, I guess we'll stop here. David will pick up from here tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.